In 1974, Bob Clark, who's best remembered as the director of Porky's and Black Christmas and A Christmas Story, made a quirky little horror movie / psychological thriller. A movie that's gone by a few titles over the years. One of them was Dead of Night. Another one of them was The Night Andy Came Home. But it's most famously known these days as Deathdream. So Deathdream is a fresh take, fresh twist on the traditional monkey's paw story, where the mother wishes for her deceased son to return with unexpected results. And this movie follows a lot of the same beats as the original monkey's paw story. So we have our protagonist, or our lead villain, I guess you'd call him, or sympathetic villain, Andy, who's a soldier in Vietnam, and he's killed in action. Meanwhile, his parents at home and his sister are going on about life as normal because they haven't heard the news yet. And then they receive a telegram that Andy has been killed in action in Vietnam, and they're understandably distraught. And Andy's mother basically keeps going on with this mantra that Andy promised her that he'd return home, that he'd never die, and so on and so forth, which apparently he said to alleviate her fears and concerns when he first went off to fight for Uncle Sam in a country far, far away for reasons that no one really still understands to this day. So as the family starts to mourn Andy, something unusual happens. Andy comes back, but suffice to say, Andy isn't the same. Andy's transformed into something else. The movie never really clearly alludes as to what this is. Some people have said a zombie, others have said a vampire or a demon or a ghost, but the movie's always fairly ambiguous about that. And that's a pretty good way to go, especially in an era where people feel that they need everything explained and fed up to them, neatly carved into small pieces on a plate. It's refreshing to see a fairly ambiguous allegory like this one, and it is very much a Vietnam allegory, a very strong Vietnam allegory. It's also an allegory about PTSD and the effects of war on the home front, and we are getting just a small taste of that at the moment, I guess you'd say, with this whole Strait of Hormuz thing, because going to war isn't just a thing that affects the people involved halfway around the world. It does affect the home front as well in various ways, and this movie does effectively convey that, although for younger people, I guess, the whole adventure off in Iraq didn't really affect the home front too much, but the current state of affairs certainly is, in terms of inflation and cost of living and supply chains and things like that. And definitely in terms of faith in institutions, it's been catastrophic towards that, I guess you'd say. And in terms of shaking up the whole world order, I don't think I'm exactly saying anything insightful by suggesting that all those things are symptoms of the current situation. But yeah, Deathdream is a cool little, very atmospheric, very creepy Vietnam War allegory. It's an allegory about PTSD, especially in the first half of the movie. It's Andy, or what Andy's become, will look very familiar to people that have known veterans before, have been close to veterans or related to veterans that have seen some stuff. And the movie is very effective in explaining that whole PTSD disorder or trauma, things like that. I'd argue that it's more effective in explaining those sort of things than your average garden variety drama would be, in a way that that is accessible. A lot of the creepiest scenes in this movie just involve Andy sitting quietly, contemplatively in a rocking chair, rocking back and forth with a wry sort of a smile on his face, almost evoking the Vietnam veteran that pretends everything's okay, and nobody around him understands him, what he's been through, what he's experienced. He's quite alien to them. He's literally a demon or a monster to some. So it really does effectively explain that side of the whole Vietnam War experience and the aftermath, and how these people were received or treated or judged when they got back to the home front. And unfortunately, we'll probably see that sort of thing play out again multiple times throughout the rest of humanity, however long that lasts. So this one was directed by Bob Clark, but it was written by Alan Ormsby, who wrote and directed another one of my favourite horror movies of the 70s, Deranged, starring Roberts Blossom, and that one was a biopic about serial killer Ed Gein, necrophile Ed Gein, cannibal Ed Gein, and another cleverly written script. And Alan Ormsby is one of the more unsung voices in 70s horror. Remarkably, he did make wrote two of the most impressive horror movies of the 70s, being Deranged and the one we're talking about today, Deathdream, aka Dead of Night, aka The Night Andy Came Home. This one's an example, very good example of less is more as well. Doesn't need pyrotechnics or anything like that, although it is quite well paced. At its heart, it is more of a psychological thriller, although it does have some very horrific elements. This one would probably make a great double bill with George A. Romero's Martin. Both movies are they share quite a few similarities. Martin's also a lost, confused, alienated young man in much the same way as Andy is. Deathdream's kind of fallen through the cracks over the years. It's not as well known, not as high profile as a lot of the big name horror movies, the big ticket horror movies of the 1970s. But nevertheless, it does deserve your attention. I won't really go so far as to say it's a fun watch. It is a fairly nihilistic, depressing, dark kind of a movie. And not exactly a fun beer and pizza movie. But regardless, I think it is required viewing for any cinephile, any fan of 1970s cinema, of strange and unusual cinema. It has built a small but devoted audience over the years, and it is a cool little movie to revisit from time to time. And unfortunately, I think that as of right now, as we head into another uncertain time for geopolitics and all the rest of it, unfortunately Deathdream, aka Dead of Night, is more relevant than probably more relevant than it was in the 70s when it was made. And thematically, concept-wise, it really hasn't aged a day. The thing that hasn't aged terribly well about this movie is the plethora of poster art. A lot of the poster art for this one looks quite confusing, quite unrelated, quite roughshod. And I really couldn't find any good examples of poster art or lobby cards. Basically what I've found to pop in this video is what it is. And really the only weakness of this film is the poster art, which is probably because the marketers never really understood this movie is probably the main reason behind that. They probably didn't really know how to market it, especially to drive-in audiences, to the late night horror crowd, because it is a movie that may have confused a fair chunk of the audience at the time, and that's why it hasn't, why it wasn't big at the time, why it sort of slipped into obscurity, and why it remains very much a textbook cult film to this day. So Deathdream is definitely one to check out, especially if you're a fan of Alan Ormsby's Deranged, or of Bob Clark's Black Christmas. It is quite a different movie to those two, but you will see the DNA in there. I believe this was Tom Savini's first foray into special effects, which is significant for its own reasons. Tom Savini was a Vietnam veteran himself. I believe he was a war photographer. And you can't help but think that the subject matter of this one would have hit pretty close to home and probably played a sizable factor in Tom Savini taking the job, as well as needing money, of course. But it's not that hard to imagine Tom Savini offering a bit of, let's just say, PTSD advice on the set, because no doubt he probably went through a lot of the same things that the character Andy does in this movie. So a very cool movie, very cool ending, which I won't spoil for you. This one's brimming over the top with social commentary, as are all the best horror movies. Well, not necessarily all the best horror movies, but a lot of the best horror movies are chock full of social commentary and have something to say, in spite of outlandish scenarios and patchy special effects. Although the special effects in this one are quite impressive for a zero budget independent movie of that time. Especially the scenes where Andy's literally and figuratively falling apart. It's also inspired a few movies. I think that the Troma movie Combat Shock was probably inspired by this one, along with Eraserhead. It does seem to have a bit of Deathdream in its DNA, as do a few other movies. And a lot of the best movies do draw from other things and make it their own, as this one did from the traditional monkey's paw story. So as I said, it's not really the most uplifting movie, but it probably is a movie for our time. It's quite timely with everything happening around the world right now. So that'll either be a good thing or a bad thing, depending on what you're in the mood for, I guess. But regardless, it's a powerful piece of 70s cinema and comes highly recommended from me. So if you enjoyed this look at Deathdream, aka Dead of Night, directed by Bob Clark, written by Alan Ormsby, by all means, please like, share and subscribe. I normally talk about strange and unusual cinema on this channel for the most part, among a few other things. that are interesting to me at the time, but for the most part it's strange and unusual cinema. So I'm off to enjoy the rest of my evening. Hope you enjoy the rest of yours, and as always, take it very easy.